Hi, I'm Gary and welcome to my shop. In this video, I'm going to show you how I installed a Forrest blade, checked and adjusted the alignment to the miter slot, and I checked a vertical alignment issue when the blade is raised and lowered, as some ran into an issue with that on this saw. And I aligned the fence with the miter slot. Now stick around to the end for some extras and some information you'll want to see. Now please subscribe and join our community by clicking on the little red icon down in the lower right corner, and be sure to hit the bell icon so you won't miss anything new. Also, please hit that thumbs up icon and give me a like, and share this with your family, friends, and fellow crafts enthusiasts. Now be sure to read the description below as it contains additional information, updates, and corrections. So check back often for the updates. So let's get to this project now. Okay, so I'm working on cleaning up my table saw here so I can install this new Forrest blade into this and get everything lined up correctly and square it up. In the process, I got to clean things out, clean it up. It's been some time since I cleaned this thing, so I was cleaning the inside of the cabinet underneath there. Took the back cover off of it, and I'll give you another shot of that. And had to get in and get all the nooks and crannies cleaned out and scrape away some stuff that kind of caked on there for a while. Then I also used my vacuum to vacuum out as much as I could. Use my air compressor to blow out as much as I can, so I've got this cleaned up pretty well. So also something I had to do is I found a few loose parts, not inside underneath the table, but on the side here that holds these brackets that hold my fence. And so I got those tightened up. Actually what they took was a number 5 Allen wrench and a number 10 metric wrench to tighten those up, and they wound up tightening up pretty good. So it was good that I found those and got those tightened up. Everything else seems to be in pretty good shape other than just getting it cleaned up. So the next step is I'm going to start working on getting this aligned underneath there. I'll loosen up a few of the trunnions. It's got 4 trunnions underneath here that hold the assembly in place underneath the tabletop. I'll loosen up 3 of them and then use a hammer to kind of tap it one way or the other to get an alignment with my dial indicator. Okay, one of the first things for me to do is to check that this arbor shaft is not bent at all. So what I'll do is I set my dial indicator on here and put it onto a flat spot that's not rubbing against the threads, and just enough out from this back washer here so that it doesn't drag against that either. So it's kind of a precarious setting. Then hold this in place while I rotate this around and see if there's any deviation on that shaft. Okay, I've got my dial indicator located here on the arbor where the blade mounts, and I've got it weighted down here with a brick to hold all this in place well. And what I'll do is get this started. Okay, it's zeroed out as it is. What I've got to do is try and rotate this without disturbing it. 360 degrees circle. Let's see if we get any variation out of it. Here we go. Okay, so I did 360 degrees. Looks like I didn't get any variation out of that, so that arbor must be straight. There's another way of testing this too, once the blade is attached, where you can get this dial indicator pointing down there and to see if there's any deflection in the side of the blade at all too. One of the things that we have to do for aligning the blade on the table saw is to check the arbor to make sure the arbor is running true. Also the arbor flange, which is what I'm doing here. And what I did is I marked a little white mark on things so I can tell when I've made a complete rotation. And I'll rotate this around complete. One turn to this white mark again, and you can see it didn't budge at all. I had checked the arbor previously also. It didn't make any budge at all either on this dial indicator. So the arbor and the arbor flange are running perfectly straight. So that'll be helpful in lining up the blade. My next step here is I'm going to install this blade onto the arbor here. And I've got this all cleaned up and all the debris off of it. Even a speck of dust can maybe throw you off by 1/1000 of an inch. So we don't want that. I'll take this blade and put it in so that the teeth are facing towards me. That's be the cutting or spinning action. And I'll slide this in here. Also, what I got was a Forrest blade stabilizer to put on here. This is a 5-inch for a 10-inch blade. Make sure everything's cleaned up, everything well, all the dust is off, everything. And I'll place this on. Next up, the standard washer that comes with the saw. And all of these I've checked out to be perfectly flat. Then I'll put the Arbor nut on. Then I will get this tightened up. Okay. Next, what I'm going to do is set up my dial indicator here, and I'm going to check the flatness of the blade here as I spin it to see if I get much of a deflection on this blade at all. Alright, so I'm going to check how much deflection there is in this blade here to see just how flat it is. I've got it set to 0. I'll rotate this blade, and you have to be careful. You put any pressure one way or the other, you kind of deflect the blade and it changes the reading a little bit. So be careful about that as you try and spin this. And let's see, I'll get to, so I got to about 4 thousandths there. I'm back to 0. And what it means is the blade is going that direction at that one particular point. That means that I will want to bring this part of the blade here out so that it deflects in about equally the same. I'm going to use a little bit of tape on that to do that. Actually, I'm within about 3 thousandths of an inch of deflection there, which is pretty good. Most manufacturers want you to be within 5 thousandths, and I think as long as I've got a good alignment from front to rear along with the miter slot, then I think that's going to be good enough, and I won't have to worry about trying to adjust this. So I'll see how that works. To gain access to adjusting the trunnions and so forth for getting this blade straight, I take this back panel off of here in order to get access underneath here. And it's got 6 of these screws in here, and they are a number 4 millimeter or 4 millimeter. So I've got a bit on my driver here, and I'm going to just pull these off. Take that off. That gets me access to the inside of my table saw here, where I can adjust these trunnions. And then what I'll do is get 3 of these loosened up, and the one in the back on the right side there, I'm going to leave that tight. I'll get these 3 loosened up, then snug back again so it holds flatly against the bottom of the table saw table. Then I'll use a plastic or rubber mallet to tap it one way or the other to get the blade lined up to where I need it to. Once I get it lined up, then I'll tighten up this one trunnion screw here and get that tight and check it again, make sure I'm okay. If I'm still okay, then I'll tighten up the other 2 and then check it again, 3rd time, make sure I'm still in alignment, and then I'll be done with that part. And I can put the panel back on. I'm going to check the alignment of my blade here from front to rear, and I've marked one tooth here with a black mark so that I'll keep aligning that when I twist it over to this direction, and then check my alignment over there again. I've got this dial indicator. It's a digital, and it has these balls on it that makes it snap into place and hold firmly into place in the miter track here. So I can pick this up and move it around. So I get this zeroed here. Got that zeroed out. Now I can't just slide over to the other side because I've got this stabilizer plate on here. So what I got to do is pull this back, slide it past, and now I can rotate my blade over and get a reading here. And I see that I'm about 7.5 or 8 thousandths of an inch off. So and the reflection is going this way. So what I need to do is to get my trunnions loose and then use the hammer to knock this over this direction to take out this slack here. So that's what I'll do, is I'll get those loosened up down there, get this adjusted up so I'm getting close to zero or within about 3 thousandths of an inch off between the front and the rear. Okay, in the back side of the table saw, what we can see here, we've got this one trunnion here. This is the rear one. There's another one exactly like this up in front, and the bolt on this side all the way up in front. I'm not going to bother with loosening that because it's just really difficult to get to. So what I'm going to do is loosen up this one up in the front and then these two back here. And these take a number 8 socket screw or an Allen wrench, and to get that in there. It's kind of precarious getting into this, and what I've done is I've got like a wobble extension bar here. Allows me to get in there, and then I can loosen it up and then tighten it back up again. So I'll loosen these up a bit, and then I'll snug them back up just slightly tight, just to keep them in contact with the bottom side of the table saw table. And then I'll adjust this with a hammer, slight taps either direction to move this to the direction I need to go. Now something else that I was speaking of in that other video about the worm gear and this main trunnion. You got this worm gear here, and then this part is the main trunnion that goes up and down when we adjust the blade. So mine has no space or no flex in it, so I'm not getting the deviation like he did on his. But it's the worm gear, main trunnion, and I'll put up some information and some links in the description below on where you can get these kind of parts and where you can look up more information on them, because information on this is not in your user manual. I'm going to put up a short clip here, and I'll show you how I checked the play when I raise and lower my blade. Okay, to check out for this blade to see how much it changes position going up and down as shown in that other video that I've got linked below, where there's a difference between the worm gear and the main trunnion. So on mine, I'm checking this out and going up and down with this. I've got that zeroed in on my gauge, getting down to the bottom. That's about it there. I'm only getting about 1/2 of a thousandth of an inch difference going from top to bottom. So that to me tells me my trunnion and worm gear and everything is pretty tight and didn't receive any damage during the shipping process as he outlined in that other video. So I guess I'm lucky on that. If you're not, then you may have to look into how you can tighten that up. Okay, I'm going to record raising and lowering this blade so I can see what is engaging in the process of doing that.
What we see is the worm screw here that drives the worm gear, which raises the blade bracket up and down. Now I'll try to get some better images of the blade bracket, but it's hard to in such a tight space as this. Shortly I'll show the parts on the online parts illustration, along with the part number labels, so hopefully you can understand that better. In the other video about the looseness in this mechanism, it was mentioned that there was a gap between the main trunnion and the worm gear, more appropriately the worm wheel. I think I have found it to be different, although I may be wrong. In delving into the parts illustration online, I see that the main trunnion carries and guides the blade bracket, but it doesn't give the rigidity to keep the blade perfectly perpendicular all the time. This is actually done in the blade bracket as mounted to the worm wheel. If there is any looseness, it would be in the mounting of the blade bracket to the worm wheel. Now that could be in the mounting plate, part 57, the bearing, part 60, or the arbor itself, part 63. If you study the parts illustration, that may make sense. It's hard to explain. But as long as you're not experiencing any deviation in the blade as you raise and lower it, then you need not to worry about it. Probably a first indicator is if the arbor is running true. If it is, it's unlikely that you have a loose blade bracket. But check the deviation when raising and lowering the blade as an extra precaution.
Okay, so I've gotten this blade checked out to make sure it's parallel going up and down as we went through that process. So tried to explain it as well as I could. Hopefully I'm right. If I'm not, let me know, because I want to know so I can make sure I've got mine right here too. So now what I'm going to do is back to the step of checking my blade parallel here, and then I'll be adjusting the trunnions down there to get this blade so it's lined up with the miter slot. So turn this on, now zero it out. So I've got 0 there. Now I'm going to slide it forward to the front, and I have to pull this pin out to get past that stabilizer. Rotate this blade around to the black mark again there. See what I've got. So I can see I'm 5/1000ths of an inch off, and that means the blade is off in this direction, so I need to knock it over this direction on the trunnions down there. So next shot I'll show you how I do that. Got this back here. I've got this trunnion in the back and the one in the front. I'm going to loosen up this bolt and the one in the front on this side, and leave the one on the right front tight. So I'm just going to loosen these 3, and then loosen them up, and then I just snug them back up again. Not tight, but just loosen it, and then just snug it so I get a little bit of resistance, and that's all I want to do. I'll do that on all 3 of these. Then I'll tap it with a hammer like this. I'll just tap it like this one or this way, depending on which direction I want to go. Then just take a couple of taps. You don't have to hit this thing really hard. And then I'll check my alignment on my blade, and then I'll probably go back and forth a few times till I get it perfect. Okay, I've gone back and forth on that trunnion there, knocking it back and forth with that hammer, and finally got it to a point where I've got it within tolerance here. So I've got my dial indicator set here to 0, and then I'm going to move it over to the other side, move my mark around, and I've got 1/1000th of an inch. That's very good. That's good enough for me. We'll go with that, and I'll get everything put back together again. Then I'll get on to aligning the fence to the miter slot. So, got the blade lined up and straight and aligned with the miter slot here. Now the next is aligning the fence, and that's going to be easy to do. One of the first things you want to do is to check that the face of your fence here is perfectly perpendicular to your tabletop. So you just take a square and put it on there and slide it along and check to see if there's any gaps along that length there. If there is, there's a few screws on the back side of this where we can make adjustments at. Next, we're going to check to see how straight this is, and using this dial gauge again, and what we're going to do is measure from this point here out to that end, and if we're going to have any deviation, we want the fence to be tilting out, not in towards the blade. So we try to get either dead on, which is really hard to do, or get it slightly outward. Otherwise, when you're pushing your stock through, you're going to wind up binding with your blade and so forth. So Don't want to do that. So let's check out and see what we've got here. Get that zeroed out. And I'll slide this down to the other end. About 8.5 thousandths of an inch off. And what I'll do is loosen up these 4 bolts on the fence here that hold the fence in place, much like the trunnions underneath the table for the blade. You got 4 bolts to loosen up. What I'm going to do is loosen up 3 of them, snug them back down again, and keep one of the bolts kind of tight. And do the same thing as I did with aligning the blade. Then I'll use my hammer here to tap it back and forth, whichever direction I need to go. Then I'll keep rechecking it. Once I get it right, I'll tighten it down, and then I'll check it a 3rd time to make sure I'm dead on after I'm done with everything. Okay, I've putzed and putzed around with this, and I finally got this zeroed in, or really close. I'm impressed with how close I got with this. And one of the things I found out was that when tapping on this fence, you know, with the hammer here, I was shifting around the base part here that clamps onto the rail on the back part here. So what I needed to do was put some clamps on here, and I'll take a picture and put that up here. Put a couple of clamps on here to hold it to the rail, and then also got another clamp underneath there to hold it up against the rail so it stays in position while I get this adjusted. And then have this locked down too, but that'll still allow it to move. So got that done. And also the Allen wrench that you need for loosening up these 4 bolts is a number 5 Allen wrench. So, and what I'll do is I'll show you. I've got this dial indicator on here, got it zeroed out, and I'll slide it down, and you can see here I get down to the end. I'm off by 1/2 thousandths of an inch going that direction, which is good. I don't want to be going this direction. I want to go that direction. So that's good. I've got a good alignment on that. Comes out really great. And basically that's it for all the adjustments on this table saw, with getting the blade aligned, the fence aligned, and also we worked with checking out for any loose parts when the blade was being raised up and down on those trunnions and so forth on that main trunnion. Okay, now it's time to make some test cuts here. I've got all this stuff lined up and adjusted. I'm going to take this piece of poplar here I've got, and it's got a rough cut on this edge here, and from the sawmill, so it's a bit rough. I'm going to do a cross cut here, and then I'll bring my fence over and do a rip cut, and we'll see how this blade and all the alignment performs. So I'm just going to take off a thin piece here. Like I was saying, it sure runs a lot quieter than my other blades did, and that is really smooth. That's a smooth cut. I don't know if you get much of a view of that in the camera. I'll take a picture of that and post it up here in case it doesn't show up clearly on the camera here. Okay, so that's a great cut. Now next I'm going to do a rip cut. So I'm just going to take a thin amount off of this. So get to that. Adjust it over so I get a slim trim off of that. And we'll see how that comes out. Get myself a push block for safety here. Yes, that is very smooth, just like they say. It's like sandpaper smooth on both of these cuts. Now let's see how square it is with all these things lined up. Now the squareness of my cut, I can look at it this way with my square. Look and see if I can see any light coming through. And that's right on. Check the squareness of this. I see nothing coming through either way, and also along this way. So perfect cut. That's what we want to do, and also really super smooth cut compared to the other side here. Really smooth. So that's it for that. Great performance out of that blade. Well, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a like and hit the thumbs up icon for me. Also, please share it with your family, friends, and fellow craftspersons. And please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell icon so you won't miss anything. And please give us your comments. We'd like to hear what you think, what questions you may have, what ideas that you have. So, thank you.